O Lord, save thy people and bless thine inheritance, granting to the faithful victory over all adversaries, and by the power of thy cross preserve thine estate.
What's your earliest memory of the church?
What they were trying to do is raise money to get a church going.
Mm-hmm.
So they would be up there in the hall, and they would play. The women would have these plays, and they would have these old costumes and everything else, and they'd come out as angels. They would come out with whatever it was that they had, and they had more fun laughing and carrying on, and because they were trying to raise money, so we had people coming up there, and they would sit there and give money to see the play.
Was that, now, you said it in the hall, where was that?
Well, it was one of the halls that they had, the dance hall up there.
It was over the City Cafe.
The City Cafe,
okay.
Yeah.
And it was like a dance hall?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They would have plays upstairs, and I guess people would pay to go watch the plays?
It was all in Greek, because nobody spoke English. So
did you have many non-Greek people come to the plays to
No, it was
watch
just the
them?
Greeks.
It was just the Greeks.
Nobody
understood.
It was all Greek to them.
But
When we were going to Greek school, if somebody did something wrong, misacted wrong or whatever, he'd turn around and look at you. The priest would, and take this ruler out, wrap your knuckles. Oh, silpi, which means be quiet.
Silpi.
Hit him again.
Take your medicine.
How many kids were in there with you? Do you remember?
Oh, I imagine we had about 15, 18, maybe 20 at the most.
How many times were your knuckles wrapped?
I can't remember.
Yeah.
Too many.
It's probably written down somewhere.
Lost track.
we had to have exercises, which was the exercises that we had to learn, and so we'd have it once a year, whatever it is, and so we'd have to have it in Greek. So my cousin was up. We all had to say a poem, or we had to read something, or read something in Greek, whatever it was, and everybody had to sit there and listen to us. Of course, it was horrible because you didn't want to. You didn't want to make a mistake or anything like that, so it was very horrible for us.
Who was the priest when you moved here?
Father Dan, Seculario.
Seculario. That was his second time, I think.
Yes, second time.
Okay. What was he like?
He was nice. He was a nice man. I remember when my older son, I would take him to church. He was maybe 6, 8 months old, 9 months old. And if he just whimper or anything, Father would send a little boy out with some, must have cookies in the altar. And give him a cookie, and I thought, so he's going to eat the cookie, and he's going to start up again,
screaming,
which is what he did. But he'd always send out another cookie.
Send out a cookie. Well, that's sweet.
But he was nice.
And who's the first priest you can remember?
First priest?
Yeah, the first priest you can remember.
Methodius.
Father Methodius.
Because there's a bunch before them, I guess.
Yeah, the first one you remember.
Started, and only reason I know that he just sit there and he was such a wonderful man there. He took patience with us. He told, and we'd listen too. He had a ruler, and if we weren't minding, I said, "Oh," he said, "When I hurt," I said, "Yeah, nice time, not gonna hurt."
Well, that's funny. Johnny Colites has told me the same thing.
Did he?
About the ruler.
He kept saying, but he let us play. We'd go out there and we'd throw the ball, and he over, off that ruler. But it seemed like that. He was I think one of my favorite. He was my favorite. Of course, nobody would take him out of Jim's place.
Seculario was fine too. A funny story. He loved to hunt.
Seculario?
Yeah, Father Dan, Jenny's dad. And so they went to my father-in-law, he and his son Frank, and they took Father Seculario out to Steve's friend, Hardy the Wolf. and they were shooting dove, and you've heard of buck fever, you know. Well, Father Dan ended up, the doves landed on the telephone lines, and so then he shot.
I can see where this is going.
He shot, and it shot the wires down. Well, Hardy DeWolf's wife was almost in labor, and they had, how in the world were they going to get a hold of them? So, oh my Lord, it was just laughed my anyway.
Oh, that's funny.
That was hilarious.
Tell me what Father Zois was like. What was he like?
Very good in the church services. He'd do the whole service automatically, and it was pretty hard to follow him with the Greek, and the others, were just following along. But when he came to pray, you just do your prayers. Do your prayers, yes. And he was very helpful.
You were telling me yesterday about when Athenagoras came came a couple of times.
He came twice, yes.
And Athenagoras, at the time, he was the Archbishop of North and South America. Is that right?
Yes.
He's the one that eventually became ecumenical patriarch.
Correct.
In Constantinople.
Yes.
And tell me about the second time.
The second time he came over, well, the church council came over and asked my mother. My father had just passed away, and they asked my mother if he could stay in their house. So she said, naturally, yes.
Sure.
So they brought him over, and he stayed in the front bedroom. And just before he went to bed that night, he said, "Would you please wake?" He looked at me and he said, "Would you please wake me up at a certain time in the morning?" I knocked on his door, and the minute I knocked, the first time he had that door open, he must have been waiting on the other side. And he came out and looked me in the face, and he says, "Good morning, my son," and kissed me right up here.
Wow.
His beard was hanging down in my face. I'll never forget that.
Well, what kind of man was he? Was he
Very humble, very nice.
Were the services all done in Greek in those days?
Yes, primarily, but he started some English with the Lord's Prayer, the Nicene Creed, and occasionally he would transfer the Bible, or the epistle would be done in English, because his English was not perfect. And that's when it first started, but the best part was, and Father Zois also had alternated some English, but when Father Jim Hadamatus started, that's when we really added more English to the services, because it was necessary, because there were very few that understood the Greek.
By that time. And Father Hadamenos became priest around, 1988?
Yes.
Or something like that? Oh, we were talking yesterday about when they started doing the services in English. Do you remember when that was?
No,
or some of the services.
Father Zois was here.
Okay.
And even Father Dan did a little bit, didn't he?
He may
I'm
have.
not sure, but I know Father Zois would give a sermon in Greek, in English, and broken English. And then when Father Jim came in, it really helped us a lot, because we could understand it a lot better.
What was it like growing up in the church with that? I mean, were you able to understand what was going on as a child, or growing up, or even as an adult, I guess? Because the Greek they use in the services is a little different than the
Yes,
Greek
it is.
you would speak on the street to someone.
Right.
Yes, it is.
And while I was in the service, I used to go to Greek church,
Okay.
and that's where I met my future wife. I was stationed here out in Mathis Field.
Oh, okay.
You know where Mathis Field
Yes,
is?
the airport is
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
That was an Army Air Corps base.
That was an Army Air Corps base. So we met. I used to, of course, that being a Greek, the only thing I know is go to Greek church on Sunday.
Sure.
So I went to church and met the young lady, and finally we got to know each other and all that. So I got out of the service, went back to Chicago, and we were corresponding back and forth. We decided to get married.
Mm-hmm.
So I came back to San Angelo to get married.
Okay.
And everybody came. I thought this just for the heck of it. Who's that?
Oh, wow. Look, can you get a close-up of that? Well, that's an incredible picture. And that's your wife.
Yeah,
And what was her name?
Joanne.
Joanne Athanas?
Spanish.
Athanas. Joanne Athanas. What's your fondest memory of the Assumption of the Virgin Mary?
Personal?
Yes.
Well, I felt very good about my son George getting married in the Greek church. He married a young lady that had converted over, and I felt very good that day. Really did.
That's great.
We had the economatuses. Of course, they were all Greek, and so everything else. And so Gregory was down there, and so the mother came out and says, "Gregory, what's going on down there?" And he says, "Nothing, Mama. Harry just fell into the river." Of course, she went, "Woo!"
Fell into the river.
Yeah, fell into the river. Good.
Oh, that's funny.
We did have our laughs all day.
Oh, Harry, you could have minded.
I was doing weddings, and one of the most interesting one, and it's Francis's cousin, Marie Manitzas, that became Marie Crumley. She married an oil man, and she had a big wedding. Crowds, invited everybody from Houston Hart that she knew, and my boss, Ed Hart. And we just had the plain windows. So we had the windows open because people were lined up on either side outside.
Oh, really?
Yes.
For
the
Mary,
wedding,
this is for
'cause
Mary
we were
Manitz's
full in
wedding?
here. Yes.
Oh, wow.
I'll never forget that wedding. And it was so interesting because her name was Marie and her husband's name was LD. And so when Dad was reciting the service, he says, "The servant of God, LD, is engaged to the servant of God, Marie." And he reversed that, and we go back into Greek, service of God, Marie is married to LD. And we kept hearing Marie and LD through all that, and I was out there with Ed Hart. We just cracked up.
Father McFudders one time there, the boys were in the altar. I think it was Chris and Johnny and Gregory.
Johnny Kalitzis?
Yeah, and Gregory Economidis and Chris. And they forgot to plug in the hot water. So he asked for the hot water. And they forgot to plug it in there. He goes over and kicks that bucket. Chris raised that window there. We jumped out there. I told you we let the block away. We got some hot water real fast and came up right in time for the communion.
So he jumped out the window, went to his house and got some hot water and brought it back.
Block away hot water and come up here with it in time for the communion.
We want to have these conversations because, you know, the church is changing, and it's not going to be what it was, but that doesn't mean that that's not a good thing. But we also want to remember what church used to be like, and that's why we're kind of talking to some folks like you.
I think it's a little better now than it was before, because back then it was just pure Greek, and, you know, now there's a combination of Greek and English, and there's a big relationship like Father and Vince, I know, was talking like a friend, you know.
Yeah, sure.
We couldn't do that with a past priest, you know. They were totally separate, you know, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But right now, it's, you know, so very good.
Because it's more interesting that we took our religion for granted. And growing up, we knew the Greek, but we didn't know the exact meaning of a lot of it.
Sure.
And now, with the English, and when you're listening to the explanations in English, you learn more, and it makes a difference. And you have the converts that come, and they know more than some of us who grew up with it. And that's what's interesting.
We all take things that we grow up with for granted, that's for sure, and don't appreciate them sometimes.
Yes, and that's what's good.
Behold, the bridegroom comes in the midst of the night, and blessed is the servant whom he shall find watching. And again